Clutching my side as sharp, relentless waves of pain tore through me, I lay sprawled on the cold, unforgiving kitchen floor. It felt as though a knife was twisting deep inside me, each movement sending fresh agony radiating through my body. Nearby, Lily, my 7-year-old daughter, stood frozen, her wide, tear-rilled eyes filled with fear that no child should ever have to experience. Her tiny hands clutched the hem of her dress, trembling as though the fabric itself could shield her from the scene unfolding before her. "Are you all right, Mommy?" Lily's voice was barely more than a whisper, shaking so much that the words seemed to waver in the air. Her fear hit me harder than the pain I was feeling. I forced myself to smile, trying to mask the agony coursing through me. "Honey, I'll be all right," I lied, my voice soft but unconvincing. The truth was, the pain was overwhelming, but I couldn't let her see it. I tried to pass it off as a bad stomachache, a fleeting discomfort, even as I felt my strength fading. Just then I heard heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching from the hallway. David, my husband, appeared in the doorway, his face shadowed by the light behind him. But instead of the concern I so desperately needed, his expression was one of irritation, as if my pain was some kind of inconvenience to him. My heart sank further. The room felt colder, not because of the floor beneath me, but because of the absence of the support I had hoped for. At that moment, I realized the weight of the battle I was facing, and not just the physical one. He had his suitcase and was ready to go. "Evelyn, what's going on? You're on the floor, but why?" David inquired in a slightly irritated tone. "David, I believe it's appendicitis. It's awful. We must visit the hospital." With every word accented by pain, I managed to choke out. He gave me a sneer. "Is it appendicitis? Most likely you're exaggerating. Probably it's simply indigestion. But, David, I truly believe—" I winced as a sudden surge of agony interrupted my words. David was clearly impatient as he looked at his watch. "This journey with Rachel is something I cannot miss. Simply make a cab call or whatever." What I was hearing was unbelievable. "I can't even move, David. Lily is present." With a desperate tone, I begged, "I need you." He gave a head shake, unmoved. "It's probably nothing. If it worsens, give us a call." He then departed, leaving his suitcase in his wake. Lily and I were left alone and in agony. With tears that mirrored mine, Lily's tiny hands found mine. "Don't be sick, Mummy. You must be all right." I mustered the last of my strength and drew Lily near. "Darling, I'm here. Mom is present." Now that David was gone, I realized I had to do something. I groped for my phone with trembling hands and called my brother Michael, the one person I knew I could rely on. The sound of the phone ringing reverberated around the still kitchen. "Hi there?" There was hope in Michael's voice. "This is Evelyn. Michael, I need assistance. Appendicitis, I believe. Lily is scared and I am immobile," I spoke, struggling with every syllable. After a moment of astonished quiet, Michael's firm, powerful voice could be heard. "I'm on my way now. Wait, Evelyn. I will arrive as soon as possible." I tried to ignore the ache by closing my eyes and leaning back against the chilly tile. Lily hugged me, her presence a little consoling. I developed a resolve in that instant. I would never forget David's abandonment during my moment of need. It was a profound wound, a betrayal that signaled a shift. One thing became evident as I waited for Michael. Never again would things be the same. I was going to see to that. The white, clean walls and the gentle beeping of the machinery surrounding me felt oddly soothing as I lay in the hospital bed. My appendix surgery had gone well, but David's abandonment had left me with a deep emotional scar. In order to care for Lily while I recovered, I had managed to call my parents, whose voices were full with worry and unsaid inquiries over David's absence. The physical ache served as a dim reminder of the recent trauma. When I returned home 3 days later, Lily rushed into my arms, her face beaming with joy at my return. "You're back, Mommy! Have you all recovered?" Her naive inquiry made me feel something. I gave her a deep hug and said, "I'm getting there, sweetie," appreciating her presence. The sound of the front door slamming open the following day broke the silence of our reunion. Raising their voices in exasperation, David and his sister Rachel barged in. "How come you didn't come get us yesterday? We had to pay more for the train and a taxi." David came into the living area, his voice loud and accusing. I was filled with rage at his foolishness. "Welcome back. You must have had a difficult time," I remarked icily, glaring into his eyes. David froze in place, taken aback by my cold response. The tension in the room appeared to surprise Rachel as well. "Evelyn, what's the attitude?" David made a demand. "I was at my breaking point," I said in a steady but enraged voice. "I was in the hospital while you were away enjoying your trip. Additionally, Rachel, you constantly ask for David's time without considering his family." David appeared perplexed, and Rachel's face flushed. "What are you discussing? You were all right?" His tone was contemptuous when he responded. "David, it's not simply about being all right," I snapped back, my annoyance erupting. "It's about being there when your family needs you." The entrance to the living room opened before David could reply, and Michael, our parents, and David's parents entered. 14 eyes stared at David and Rachel with differing levels of disappointment and rage. "Why is everyone present?" Under their combined scrutiny, David's confidence dwindled and his voice faltered. I inhaled deeply, using words to express my hurt and betrayal. "When Lily and I most needed you, David, you abandoned us. You weren't present when I needed to be admitted to the hospital. I've told our families everything." My statements seemed to make David stifle, and he lost his customary bluster. He looked about for an ally, but he couldn't find one. "David, it's not just this one instance." With a disappointed tone, my brother Michael said, "It's about all the times you've put Rachel's needs above your own family." Rachel, who usually exudes such confidence, became uneasy as her eyes shifted from the floor to the irate faces surrounding her. David made an effort to justify himself, using a combination of weak justifications and excuses. Tension was in the air, and the confrontation was fierce. However, it marked a turning point in my life. I came to the realization that I could no longer live under the shadow of David's disregard. Change was needed, and I needed to defend Lily and myself. Although there was no conclusion at the end of the conference, the message was quite obvious. David's reckless exterior had been shattered, and I had the backing of both our families. David's parents gave me a pitying glance as they walked away, a tacit admission of their son's shortcomings. The day's events replayed in my head as I lay in bed that night. I experienced a range of feelings, including disappointment, rage, and a renewed sense of strength. It was time for me to take charge of my life because David had revealed his true nature. Tension and unsaid words dominated the days after the altercation. The air between us was heavy with the unspoken, despite David's best efforts to pretend nothing had changed. During those days, I thought a lot and came to terms with how unhappy I was and how much I needed to change. The choice I made wasn't simple, but it seemed essential. Like a welcome change in a long, stuffy room, I approached David one evening with a document in my hand as he was casually scrolling through the TV stations while seated on the couch. Despite my racing heart, I remained resolute. "We need to talk, David," I stated steadily. An expression of irritation flashed across his face as he looked up. "Evelyn, what now?" After inhaling deeply, I gave him the folder. "I'd like a divorce." David looked at me with a mixture of derision and incredulity on his face. "Divorce? Evelyn, don't be silly. You're going overboard." With an increasing sensation of empowerment, I shook my head. "This isn't an exaggeration. I've given this a lot of thought. You've consistently prioritized Rachel and yourself over Lily and me. I can no longer live this way." A sneer distorted David's face. "You believe you can do it alone? Evelyn, don't be so gullible." Even though his statements were intended to cause pain, I refused to back down. "David, I'm not a fool. I know what this implies. But rather than keep feeling invisible in my own marriage, I'd rather face that uncertainty." His laugh was harsh and icy. "Evelyn, good luck. Once you understand how difficult life is outside, you'll be unable to return." Despite my growing rage, I maintained my cool. "I won't. This is my choice, and I will not change it." David briefly gave the impression that he might continue the argument, but then he shrugged and grinned haughtily. "Okay, do as you please, but keep in mind that I told you." I had a range of feelings as he dismissed me once more and turned back to the TV. Yes, there was dread, but there was also a sense of freedom that was freeing. I was emerging from the shadows and taking charge of my life at last. I started the divorce legal process the following day. I was resolute despite the intimidating process, which was full with regulations and paperwork. Michael and my parents were helpful, encouraging, and supportive. David, I'm not a fool. I know what this implies. But rather than keep feeling invisible in my own marriage, I'd rather face that uncertainty. His laugh was harsh and icy. Evelyn, good luck. Once you understand how difficult life is outside, you'll be unable to return. Despite my growing rage, I maintained my cool. I won't. This is my choice, and I will not change it. David briefly gave the impression that he might continue the argument, but then he shrugged and grinned haughtily. Okay, do as you please, but keep in mind that I told you. I had a range of feelings as he dismissed me once more and turned back to the TV. Yes, there was dread, but there was also a sense of freedom that was freeing. I was emerging from the shadows and taking charge of my life at last. I started the divorce legal process the following day. I was resolute, despite the intimidating process, which was full with regulations and paperwork. Michael and my parents were helpful, encouraging, and supportive. During our sessions, he would frequently make sarcastic comments regarding my potential as a mother and my future without him. However, his previously crippling remarks have simply strengthened my resolve to escape his poisonous hold. During one of our last encounters, David made fun of Evelyn, saying, "Enjoy your life of struggle. You'll quickly see how wonderful your relationship with me was." I was angry by his haughtiness, but I remained calm. With an unwavering voice, I shot back, "I'd rather struggle every day than spend another moment with someone who has so little regard for his family." For an instant, David's arrogant attitude wavered and was replaced by a flash of rage. I could see my words had struck a chord, but he swiftly covered it up with a scoff. I experienced an odd mixture of relief and anxiety on the day the divorce was finalized. Although I was no longer with David, the road ahead was difficult. Nevertheless, I felt a wave of freedom as I left the courthouse. I was prepared to take on any obstacles that might come up. David's life started to fall apart in the weeks that followed. His divorce and careless actions were the talk of the office. His once admired co-workers now viewed him with a mixture of contempt and sympathy. His pleasant exterior had given way to his selfishness and pettiness. Thanks in large part to my cousin, a well-known person in our neighborhood, word of our divorce and the reasons behind it circulated across our town. David, who had always taken pride in his reputation and image, was now the focus of critical looks and whispered discussions. Rachel had her fair share of criticism. Since it was now widely known that she had meddled in our marriage, friends and neighbors started to distrust and disapprove of her. In her opinion, the strong bond she had once had with David was now strained and uncomfortable. I heard David and Rachel arguing angrily outside their home one evening when I was picking Lily up from school. They spoke with bitterness and blame in their tones. "Rachel, you're to blame for our current predicament," David screamed, clearly frustrated. "You have no right to blame me. It was you who failed to maintain your family's unity," Rachel retorted, her voice brimming with rage. Their disagreement stood in sharp contrast to their previous united front. Now they were experiencing the repercussions of the conflict their deeds had finally created. Taking Lily with me, I felt validated as we left. At last, the consequences of their selfishness were David and Rachel. They had forced themselves to learn the hard lesson. I sat by the window that night and thought over the last few months while Lily slept soundly in her chamber. Although the path had been challenging, it had brought me to a position of strength and dignity. Even though the road ahead was uncertain, I felt prepared to face it with renewed confidence, since I had battled for both Lily's future and my dignity. Following the divorce, a new, quieter, but more satisfying rhythm was established in life. There was a renewed sensation of independence in place of the chains of my unhappy marriage. With Lily by my side, I began to reconstruct my life piece by piece. Finding a job was the first thing I did. I was worried about the gap in my resume caused by the years I spent raising a child, but I was adamant. I was hired at a small accounting business after multiple interviews. The atmosphere was accommodating and sympathetic, and the company was led by a woman who supported working mothers. For me, It was the ideal fit. With the resiliency that only children have, Lily adjusted to the changes. As she entered kindergarten, she made new friends and learned a lot. In sharp contrast to the tense silence that had previously dominated our home, her laughing and conversation brought us joy. However, the memories of my time spent with David did not entirely go away. I heard several parents talking. "That's her, Evelyn," one afternoon as I was leaving Lily off at school. "I've heard that her spouse left her because he was sick of being around her." I kept my head up, even if their remarks hurt. The freedom and tranquility I now enjoyed outweighed the gossip and criticism. In the meantime, David's decline persisted. His previously impeccable reputation was now marred, and his pride had suffered a serious blow. Mutual acquaintances informed me that he had returned to living with his parents, which he made an effort to conceal but ultimately revealed. It was no better for Rachel. She had lost many of her friends as a result of her interference in our marriage. Due to guilt and remorse, the once inseparable siblings were now hardly able to communicate. For my part, I took comfort in my family's support. As my brother Michael grew closer to us, his presence provided us with constant solace. My parents lavished Lily with affection, their affection a salve for the scars of the past. I thought back on my travels one day when I was drinking coffee in my kitchen. All of it, the suffering, the effort, the freedom, had brought me to this peaceful moment. In addition to surviving, I had come out stronger and more confident. I was startled out of my reverie by the sound of the doorbell. David was standing there with a defeated expression on his face when I opened the door. "Evelyn, I apologize. It wasn't until it was gone that I truly understood what I had." The weight of that realization settled in my chest, heavy yet liberating. David's belated apologies only served to confirm what I already knew deep down. My decision was the right one. I didn't respond harshly. There was no need for bitterness. "It's too late. Thank you, David," I said calmly, my voice steady with a sense of closure. "I've moved on," I added, and for the first time those words didn't feel like an act of defiance, but a quiet truth. As I said goodbye to David and the life we once shared, I felt an unmistakable finality. A door closing behind me, but another opening ahead. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I held the pen, where I was the sole author of my story. It was a chapter filled with endless possibilities, free from the shadows of the past. As I stood there, I heard Lily's cheerful voice calling from the living room. A smile spread across my face as I walked toward her, ready to embrace the life waiting for me. A life brimming with hope, freedom, and promise. If you're drawn to stories of second chances, empowerment, and the beauty of new beginnings, make sure to subscribe to the SoraBook channel. There are more inspiring and captivating stories waiting for you in the next videos. You won't want to miss them.